Hi guys, this is Dave Dembski speaking to you from my basement in quarantine in West Palm Villas. Uh, what I want to go over with you, this is my summary of the landscape survey that we've finally received 16 responses on. This is my summary. Along with this kind of video summary, you're going to get a detailed spreadsheet. And what I'd like you to do is look at that detailed spreadsheet and reach your own conclusions about what the survey tells you, and do that independently. Then compare that with this slide presentation and let me know where maybe I got some things wrong, I missed something, or there's something we should include, because we may use something like this slide presentation to send it out to all the owners so that they get feedback on the survey that they sent us. And then probably more importantly is, based on what you think the survey is telling us, where do you think we need to focus the efforts of our committee? And I think the good news is here is I think we see some clear consensus of results from this survey. I kind of thought this was going to happen, and it pretty much did. So let me remind you of what was in the survey. We asked some questions about what types of landscaping need to be improved, and that's pulling weeds, cutting grass, trimming hedges, and so on. We asked about the areas of landscaping within the community, and we asked two sets of questions: what needs to be maintained and what needs to be improved. We asked how important was the landscaping in your decision to purchase a unit here in this community, because that's pretty reflective of what future buyers may see when they look at the community and what our homes may be worth in the future. We asked some questions about the performance of the existing landscaping company. We communicated to them the three principles that we arrived with and asked if they agreed with those principles. And we asked to what extent were they able to volunteer some of their time and some of their funds to help some voluntary efforts, and then ask for some overall suggestions. So I'll go through each of these categories, and what I'm trying to portray to you here is, here's what the facts of the survey are telling me, and I want you to compare that with the detailed spreadsheet I sent you. So in terms of the response rate, we got 16 surveys back. There are 28 residents. That's a 57% response rate overall. It's pretty poor. It's not bad for a survey. Good news is 82% of the full-timers we got surveys from, 18%, only 2 surveys from the part-timers. The 3 full-timers that didn't respond, one of those was Fuller, and he since said he's moving, he decided it wouldn't be appropriate to fill it out. I never did get a survey back from Mark Previty, but I sent him several emails, and I talked to Ann and sent her a survey, but she told me she was probably not going to fill one out. But good news is 82% of the full-timers got very good survey results back from them. First question we asked is, what types of landscaping need to be improved? And this was things like grass cutting, grass fertilization, palm tree pruning, weed control in the beds. And you can see we got some very common areas of concern. The first one was weed control and mulch in the beds. Most people think they're doing a relatively poor job of that. Second primary area was power washing of driveways and sidewalks. The third area was again related to the beds and related to bed care, picking up loose cuttings, trees, and branches. And you can see what the other areas were. Now, we also asked people to submit some open-ended comments regarding that first question. And the open-ended comments primarily dealt with the beds. People were really concerned about in the beds. When you look at the spreadsheet, I've transcribed verbatim all of the open-ended comments, so you can go through there and see what all the individual comments were. That overall, people are very concerned about the beds. That's the big news here, and the power washing, not power washing the driveways. The next primary question we asked was what areas of landscaping need to be well maintained into the future. And again, we got some very strong consensus here. Most people think the community entry sign is the most important thing. The pool area is the second, and the front entry sidewalk and shrub areas are the third. When you look at you can see the other areas that were raised also. When you look at the open-ended comments, they related primarily to the entryway and the pool were the primary areas of concern. The next area that we asked was what areas of landscaping need to be improved. And again, we got some consensus here. The first area was the pool area. Second priority was the open area just to the right after you enter around the mailbox. And the third area was the brick wall and shrubs around the boat dealers. When you look at the open-ended comments, where did they focus most of them? They focused again on the brick wall area, the pool, and the entry area. So when you combine questions 3 and 5, in other words, what areas need to be well maintained and what needs to be improved, that combination kind of gives you an analysis of what areas the owners think are most important in this community. And clearly, the primary concern is the pool, the entry area, and the open area to the right. They're also very concerned about the brick walls, the front unit entries, and the lakeside beds. We asked a question about how important was the landscaping in West Palm Villa, how important was that to you when you made your decision to purchase here? And here's the distribution of responses we got there. 20% of the responses says that landscaping was not important or somewhat important. But kind of not surprisingly to me, 80% said it was important and extremely important. So that tells me that landscaping in this community is a real asset, and we need to be taking care of it. We asked a series of questions about how satisfied were people with the current landscapers. And we broke it into two pieces. How satisfied were you in how they're doing in maintaining your beds? And here's the response we got. Overall, pretty satisfied, although some unsatisfied comments. How satisfied are you with how well the landscapers are maintaining the beds in the common areas? And overall, pretty good satisfaction. But then we asked open-ended questions to go with each of those questions, number 9 and 11. And down at the bottom, you'll see where most people focused their concerns. And this ties back to the categories of landscaping that need to be improved. Real concern about weeds in the beds, both in the owner beds and the common beds, and concerns about picking up trimmings and trash in those areas. Then we asked 3 questions about our 3 landscaping principles that we set up to guide us in our effort. And the first 2 principles we got basically total agreement with. And the first principle was landscaping standards, and that standard said, or that principle said, that standards that the committee will develop for how the current landscaping company is to perform their routine duties will apply to all units and common areas within the community. In other words, we're not going to give landscapers separate instructions on how to treat one set of beds versus the other, and all the respondees agreed with that. The second principle had to do with shrubbery consistency. And there we said, over the years, slightly different types of shrubs have been planted in the community, and the heights similar, and different types of shrubs differ to some degree between unit and common areas. The landscape committee feels no attempt should be made to achieve absolute consistency throughout the property. And by that we meant we're not going to cut every bush of this height to this height and this width and so on. We're just going to keep things basically trimmed the way they are. You can see we got 15 agrees and 1 disagree. But when you look at the open-ended comment for the one person that said they disagreed, their open-ended comment basically indicates to me that they really agree with the principle. So we got pretty much full agreement on those 2 principles. On the third principle, we got some partial pushback, I guess, but I think it was very constructive. So this had to do with individual owner communications with the landscapers. And we said individual unit owners are not to communicate specific requirements for how to maintain their shrubs or beds, but rather communicate any concerns to the HOA operations manager. And the concern was there is we can't be giving 28 sets of instructions to the landscapers. They'll get confused and our costs will go up and it'll just become a mess. So the 3 people disagreed with that, and when you look at their comments, 3 of their comments had a very common theme, and that is, okay, if you see a landscaper doing something in your bed or anywhere in the community, and they're not doing it to the standards that we upset, the owner should be able to advise them individually at the time and provide that feedback to the person that they observe doing it. And I think that's a good suggestion. We're not saying we're going to have different standards, but if you see the landscapers not doing something right, talk to them immediately at that time and just remind them what the standards are. And so that I do not think violates the initial principle that said we're going to have one set of standards for the landscaper. Now, one person did come back and said that there was one of their beds that they didn't want to have weed killer put in, and that they were going to do that themselves. I really don't agree with that, because that kind of gets back to someone trying to give individual instructions on an individual piece to their whoever's handling their landscaping. So this is a principle that I think we're going to have to fine tune a little bit, and so we'll discuss that at the next meeting. We asked some questions about whether or not people would be willing to voluntarily support some landscaping projects, and we said, would you be able to be willing to provide some of your time? 10 responses said yes, 5 said no. And that's fine. You know, a lot of people buy townhomes in here because they don't want to spend time doing the landscaping. And I think we should respect those that say, nope, I don't care to do it. But I'm pleasantly surprised to say that 10 people said, yeah, they would. And then we asked, would you be willing to spend a little money, $50 to $100 a year, supporting some of these voluntary efforts? And the response there was, yeah, 9 people said yes, 5 said no. So I was pleasantly surprised with that. And basically, it's the full-timers who are willing and ready to do some volunteers. So that tells me we've got a lot of resources here that we can use to do low intensity things that don't cost a lot of money and don't take a lot of manpower and sweat and tears. And we asked people to volunteer some projects that would be good for volunteers. And we got some real clusterings around 4 particular areas. The first area had to do with comments about, let's see if we can power wash the walls collectively. And you'll see there the comments that were made and the unit numbers that made that. The second area was, let's do some voluntary efforts to improve the pool area. And I know some of you have already done that. Don is in there watering every day. We've got new flowers. Francois power washed the concrete in there. I think there's some more things we could do in there at very low cost. Uh, and then people are concerned about the area to the right of the entrance when you come in, which includes the mailboxes. There ought to be some things we can do to improve that area. And then the fourth area was some people are concerned that we need to screen either with wood fencing or with some plants, some certain areas, certain pieces of equipment within the community. The one that really jumps out is the pump house in the front, and I think we could do something there relatively inexpensively. And power washing the driveways, I'm sorry, was the fifth area. All the other items were individual comments, and you'll see them in the spreadsheet. Now, here's what I would like you to do after you've seen this presentation is go through this Excel file with all the data from the spreadsheets. And I've transcribed that verbatim. I didn't put people's names, but I put everybody's unit number at the top. And I want you to look at that and come to your own conclusions about what that tells us we should be doing. And if you remember at the last meeting, we said we're going to focus our efforts on the primary areas that the owners tell us they want us to focus on. Then when you reach your own conclusions, review these slides and see if you make any additions, corrections to these slides so that we could potentially use this slide deck to communicate the survey results to the community. And since we ask them for their input, I think the quicker we can turn around, hey, here's what we asked, and here's what you told us, therefore here's what we're going to focus our efforts on. And then what I would like you to do, I'm probably going to schedule a meeting for early next week. We'll have it again at the pool. I would like you to come up with a summary of, okay, where do you think what should we do next as a committee? What should we investigate based on what the survey's telling us? So I went through this exercise myself, and I'll show you what I came up with, but I don't want that to lead you in any particular way. This is just my personal analysis, and I really encourage you to come up with your own. The more diverse opinions and discussions we get within the committee, the better we're going to come up. We're going to come up with better solutions. So do not go by what I say. But when I was putting my list together, I kind of had three criteria in mind. And I asked myself, does what I'm coming up with align with the priorities in the survey? Will whatever we try to do be visible to owners? Because I think if we're going to do something around landscaping, it should be visible. And whatever we do, we need to keep cost in mind. Now, that doesn't mean we need to do everything voluntarily, but we also don't want to do everything by farming it out and having HOA pay for it, because a lot of this is relatively simple and low cost, and a lot of us don't mind doing it at all. So I want you to come up with your own conclusions. So the next slide is what I've concluded I think we need to look at based on these results. The first one is I think we need to revise the specifications and standards that are currently in the contract for Cody's landscaping. And we need to get them more focused on pulling weeds out of the beds, picking up cuttings and trash from the beds, and potentially scale back some of the trimming of all the shrubs. If you remember the contract, it says they're supposed to trim all the shrubs in the whole community 4 times a month. Well, they're not doing that. That's basically impossible. They're doing basically focusing on one building one week and the next building the week after that. So I think we need to tighten up the areas on weed pulling and getting trash out of the beds, especially beds in the front of the entries of the units and beds around the pool. And that's based on the responses to questions 1 and 2 in the regarding types of landscaping, and questions 9 and 12 from performance of the current landscapers. I think we need to identify some voluntary efforts, which could be voluntary or HOA funded, and I think we can determine what we think that ought to be. Of course, the primary area is improve the pool area, power washing of the walls, potentially do that voluntarily, potentially contract it out if it's not too expensive, improve the open area next to the mailbox, and potentially beautify the entry sign area with some flowers or any other ideas we come up with. And that's basically the responses we got on questions 2 and 3 on what are the areas that needs to be maintained in the future. Questions 5 and 6 regarding what areas need to be improved. And I think we need to look at some options on power washing the driveways and screening the pump house or other items. And we may want to look at what it would cost to contract it out versus doing some of that work ourselves. And there's the questions that I based